Yo! What's going on, guys? This is Grim Reaper back with some more, a little bit more, and much more after that. Just much more, just all that, bro. Let's go with y'all, boys. As you can tell from the thumbnail, from the title, today's video is going to be controversial. And as such, I'd like to push all the blame towards our Patreon supporter, the individual who requested this video, DragLogia5. If you'd like to get your own video requests and your own video ideas to get your perspective in contrast with mine out there, check out our Patreon and our Discord below. Now let's get into it. The topic of this video came from somebody wanting to discuss the disaster level of deep sea. Now, he says that in the deep sea incident, it was pretty clear that some iffiness was going on with the disaster levels. And it's kind of the point where we saw what it really means to threaten a city. So here's where I want to start off this conversation. To answer Draglogia directly, no, I don't think Deep Sea King could be a dragon. I don't think that High Demon is a thing. And we have to be careful as to, like, when we try and push certain individuals, like, up disaster levels, because there are some pretty strong guys in the demon category. Let's not, like, get that, like, twisted or anything like that. But there's also a problem with, just in general, this was brought up to me by Smurf, or it was not necessarily a problem, but an observation that he brought up. We didn't really get, like, dragon, like, disaster level panels until later on in the series. He claims that it was the Centipede the first time where we actually saw an official disaster level claim. Now, I haven't been able to do a reread in, like, the past, like, month to confirm something like that, because I do remember seeing disaster level panels consistently. So if that's really the case, because we can confirm some individuals who we didn't get a disaster level for. Didn't get one for Beefcake. Is he a demon? What about Orochi? Is he a god? You see the questions there? Now we can use our sense and the definitions of each disaster level to kind of hone in on what their appropriate designation should be. But that isn't necessarily always exact, and it isn't necessarily always correct. Now, we do have to, I will make the stipulation that we're not disregarding what the series actually said. If the series is actually claiming this monster is a demon, we're going to adhere to that. But it doesn't mean that we can't point out an issue in the situation between. Let me just put it like that. It's an issue, right? So we're told that as a demon, you're supposed to be able to threaten the entirety of a city. Right? Now, we could think of some, maybe for sure, we could think of certain scenarios that would actually be threatening an entire city that the Deep Sea King scenario brought. And that would warrant the situation. For example, the entire coast of the city, or at least one of the beaches, gets hit with a huge tsunami that they really didn't even, like, predict. And you can usually, like, predict tsunamis ahead of time. They usually do that. It will set the tsunami up like that. Okay. That could be something to alert the entirety of the city, or at least a portion in low-lying areas. Still not something to alert the entirety of it, right? I don't remember seeing any fires. That would be an issue. Destroying buildings, right? Terrorist attacks, right? I could see it happening in that manner as well. But even then, it would really be just downtown. We've heard of terrorist attacks before in all kinds of different countries. France, people driving on the roads, running people over, doing all kinds of things. Stabbing sprees in New England, shooting sprees in the United States. So, in all those scenarios, I've never heard of the entirety of those cities being shut down for those instances. So, like, maybe it could be said that the response in these cities is going to be different, and narrative-wise, that's what's going to dictate why these individuals or these monsters being designated these disaster levels. Because, without question, if you're evacuating a portion of the population to a shelter because of this incident, that's pretty significant. We saw for the hurricane situation, a lot of those, like, coastal cities in the United States around Louisiana or whatever, that state, they were decimated, and they had, like, Huge shelter output. Same thing happens in Puerto Rico, in the cases of those like constant and frequent storms and hurricanes in the Caribbean. And still, it doesn't seem like maybe we could say that the island could be threatened. The city could be threatened because they went into the shelters. Maybe you could make that assumption, but I don't think it's fair to just. I don't think it's fair to just disregard the reality of the scenario. In One Punch Man, the cities are ginormous, huge. Like they're not average cities. You can go to most places downtown, most illustrious, beautiful, grandiose cities around the world, and they don't have skyscrapers as far as the eye can see. They don't fill the skyline. A single type of structure doesn't like literally take the entire landscape down as far as it goes, all the way to the horizon. That is the case in One Punch Man. If you look at several different panels, whether it's the panel where Meta Knight comes down in front of Genos, where there's the panels where Garou's walking after he got freed from the Monster Association after having that encounter or whatever, and you see the background of the city back there. Whether it's Tatsumaki in Psychic Situation, where Tatsumaki lifted the base and we saw King all the way at the top when he came out on top. We saw the surroundings behind a Psychos and stuff like that. These cities are. It's crazy. It's crazy. So it's not even an average thing like that. Like, cities in Puerto Rico are not built like that. Cities in the United States are not built like that. So, to be realistic, maybe we should move the standard of dragon and demon up a notch. Maybe some of the dragons that we've seen are really demons. If we really want to take it to a straight realistic basis. Remember, this is just a different viewpoint, a different analysis. This is not how we're actually looking at it canon-wise. But if we were to take a different viewpoint, a different analysis, how many people outside of Vaccine Man are really dragons? Like, Vaccine Man was literally threatening the entire city. His bombs were expansive. They were taking up multiple city blocks. Not like one or two, but multitudes of city blocks. All expansion. Not to mention the residual debris, the wind force that would be destroying all these areas, stuff like that. Like, it's in this succession and he's spamming them. Like, there's really not a, like, Vaccine Man could have really become a high dragon. If he wasn't a high dragon, anything what he was doing. We didn't really get to see a long display of his abilities. We just had to see him grow. We got to see like his hands and stuff like get bigger or whatever. But like at the end of the day, like Vaccine Man should have gotten a high dragon panel for his destruction. At least compared to some of the other dragons that we've seen. But he didn't get it. So this brings us full circle. There are multiple monsters in the series who it seems they should have gotten a different disaster level ranking because of what they've shown. Or some traits are so valued that we personally believe that they should be stronger. This is why this is so speculative. This is why there's a lot of room for negotiation, contrast, discussion. Whenever we mention points, this nigga's really humping my pillow, bro. Bro! This is why there's so much room to discuss a variety of possibilities, or to champion a variety of reasons as to why a certain creature should have been a higher disaster level than he was. I myself have to claim that Hadagiri, for example, tremendous interest in the series, really aloof, silent, devious. I loved how he came into the story. From the stats and the dialogue, he's pretty much a high dragon. What did I say? A dragon? A high demon. And I can see it fairly being put inside of that category, but if the ninjas were dragons because of their speed almost alone, not to mention their skill, don't get me wrong, but almost their speed alone, Haragiri couldn't be that far away from Bakuzan. Like it really wasn't like that. And that's just one instance. What about the example of 100 Eyes Octopus? Not only the 100 Eyes Octopus, we troll about this all the time, but I troll about it because there's significance to the sentiment. I'm trying to point something out there that like even the S-Class have to try. That putting more than one effort into things doesn't necessarily mean that you're just trash. Like sometimes you have to put more effort into something. It's just the case. Like it's just the case. If an individual as strong as Flashy Flash, with the indomitable capability to fight two extremely strong dragons at the same time and beat them both in a very, very small time span, probably less than 10 seconds, probably less than 2 minutes for the entirety of the fight. If he requires a second effort in order to completely demoralize, manhandle, body 100 Eyes Octopus, that should say something not only about 100 Eyes Octopus, but about Flashy Flash. But more importantly, that maybe 100 Eyes Octopus's dash level should have been higher. We know what his power was, right? The more debris that he eats, the more concrete that he eats, the larger he gets. The more mass he has, the more surface area you have to cut in order to actually do significant damage to him, in order to hit, do whatever to him, requiring a stronger opponent regardless of who it may be. We got to the point where he had eaten so much that Flash required a second effort already. So, how much more debris, how many more buildings, like, what amount of concrete is necessary for 100 Eyes to really become a dragon? Was he already a dragon? Is that why it was necessary for Tatsumaki to come down? Or was it just his size? Are we really confusing this like confusion of like stronger disaster levels, or somebody should be at a higher disaster level because of one trait? I think so to a small degree. And I relate that to Bug God. Just before I started to stream, a few of the members in the Discord were talking about how Bug God could have been a low dragon, especially with his transformation. That's speculative to me. Not because I necessarily like have a grudge against Bug God or like didn't necessarily like Bug God. He had a really cool design. You guys know I'm all about designs. It was more so that like his presentation didn't really show that much. Like more of the evidence was led towards in the Goro fight. And sure, his defense was impressive, but that was really it. Goro himself even mentioned at that time period that he was feeling confident in the fight, that he really believed that he could do it, and he was proving it. So I don't really doubt that Goro could have maybe overcome Bug God, or maybe even like had a high to extreme diff fight with Bug God in an amplified state, or in his boosted state, his awakened state, quote unquote. Either way, Darkshine didn't leave us much room to like speculate, to play with, nothing at all. He just took him out in 1 second. We don't know his true durability. We don't know the true durability of that state. We don't know his combat ability in that state to really give him the low dragon claim if we were going to give him that. It's fair to speculate on that, at least I agree, but like, I could accept reasoning that says that some of these examples that we could bring up of false disaster levels are invalid just as much as they're valid. For example, if we're going to invalidate the Bug God example, quote unquote, and maybe we should validate the Beefcake example. I believe it was Murata or One himself that stated that if Beefcake would have been on screen longer, would have gotten a longer disaster level, or a greater disaster level. We saw from the presentation of his power, we saw from his size, we saw from what he was doing before, his capabilities, how he came into Inception. This wasn't some like average monster. This wasn't some like crazy, chaotic, like monster or brainless beast that was going around destroying things and just causing havoc. That wasn't the scenario. It wasn't some mutated pervert. No, this was like a sentient individual who made this his goal, and he succeeded, indefinitely succeeded. He made a dragon like nothing. These are two humans, a regular scientist, and he made a dragon like nothing, and a high dragon at that. I think it's like a scientist Fukugao, I forgot the guy, the brother's name or whatever. But either way, like, are we really gonna call Beefcake a demon? Like, are we really gonna doubt that Beefcake couldn't fight Elder Centipede if he really wanted to? Is Rover versus Beefcake not a toss-up? Like, we can say no to a lot of these things. I myself have said no to a lot of those scenarios, but it doesn't mean that it's not appropriate to speculate about them, or that I may be wrong. I once brought up the fact that I think Genos would have a better time up against Beefcake than, for example, Bang would. Not necessarily because Genos is stronger, but his abilities allow an ease of mobility or an ease of different attributes than what Bang can do. Bang obviously has the advantage of power, but that's not even clear. Let me not even say obvious. It's not even clear with that. I'm not saying that Genos can match the Sky or a Fist or the Dragon Fist, but he got some cannons on him, bro. He could do something to him. And we don't know the real durability of Beefcake. Got knocked out with one punch. It's like Tama, but it was one punch. So, at the end of the day, the journey that Deep Sea King took was amazing. We often in like slang talk mention how we desire for certain characters to get the Deep Sea treatment or the Phoenix treatment, emphasizing how we loved how those fights were, how those fights played out in the scenarios and sequences of those fights, and we'd like them to have another events. Like Pure Blood. I ain't gonna lie to y'all boys, I'm biased on Pure Blood. Like, I want people to get the deep sea treatment, man. Like, that's what I really wanted, bro. But it wasn't the time or place, and it didn't get introduced. It didn't get introduced in a scenario where that could like actually flourish like cohesively. So, at the end of the day, it's for a purpose that these disaster levels are left so ambiguous. It's not only for us to speculate and conversate on as like fans, so that we could have our own opinions and our own viewpoints and like populate the world with our own like perspective and our own twist on it, but it's restrictive to give them exact disaster levels and hold to a certain rubric. The series itself plays jokes and like basically has satirical comments on like the falsehood or the failure of the disaster level ranking system in general. Like, even the hero ranking system isn't necessarily like correct, as we see with multiple heroes and Saitama inclusively as one of the main characters. So there's several aspects of this that are like not only used for comedy, but the main purpose that they're used for is for a narrative reason. Like, maybe there's a reason why Beefcake wasn't given disaster level. Maybe it was to show us that, like, more so than just your power, you have to show your power. And your power has to be a nuisance for you to get a higher disaster level. Maybe that could be the case. I haven't really heard an argument that's really telling me that Evil Eye is just like a low demon or anything like that. If anything, I've heard mostly claims that Evil Eye would probably be the closest to low demon out of all the ones that are there. G5, we could talk about a bunch of different scenarios, but he just has different abilities. He wasn't alive enough to like really show off for us to like call him a dragon or anything like that. And like, he fought Tatsumaki. It's often individuals who use those same claims as the evidence as to why he would be a high dragon or a dragon that give the evidence or that like make these claims in general. So like, there isn't much to really say. Like, those people have their opinions. I agree with them sometimes, more so than not, maybe like 60% of the time. I myself believe in the proponent that One Punch cities are larger than normal cities. And that whenever I do versus matches or versus tournaments, including multiple series or multiple different mangas or whatever, I use the One Punch Man rubric, but in a realistic style. If you're threatening an entire city, it's going to be an entire city. One hand-to-hand fighter that's pretty tough that can fight, a dragon doesn't mean that he himself should be a dragon. It's just that he has the abilities to combat this individual and he's specialized. But he himself cannot threaten the entire city. A guy that can just punch and kick and move around fast, he cannot destroy the entire city. He can just fight guys that are really, really strong. So that's where it becomes difficult to even use it outside of the One Punch Man context, because you are going to get that. You are going to get like dragon level fighters that can't destroy a city. That's going to be the case a lot of times. So, with that being said, shout out to Drag Logan, like I said before, for his video request. I did like the topic about the falsehood of some disaster levels in One Punch Man. I'd like to speculate upon that a lot more, as we already speculate every single stream. Every single disaster level declaration, we already talk about it. So if you guys want to talk about this topic and the topics more, join the family. If you guys want to play Minecraft with us tonight, and just whatever, come to the Discord, the link in the description, and we'll see you boys next time.